Cells.
Cells.
Have you ever been in an institution? Cells.
Cells.
Do they keep you in a cell? Cells.
Cells.
When you're not performing your duties, do they keep you in a little box? Cells.
Cells.
Interlinked.
Interlinked.
A year ago, for Conan's birthday, we talked about Ridley Scott's original 1982 Blade Runner, adapted from Philip K. Dick's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, and co-written as a screenplay by Hampton Fancher and David Peoples.
You're watching television. Suddenly you realize there's a wasp crawling on your arm.
I'd kill it.
You're reading a magazine. You come across a full-page nude photo of a girl.
Is this testing whether I'm a replicant or a lesbian, Mr. Deckard?
Just answer the questions, please.
Ridley Scott had plans for 3 decades to eventually expand the Blade Runner franchise. However, the original film's producer, Bud Yorkin, who had gotten divorced and ended up giving part of the rights to Blade Runner to his ex-wife in court, had a hard time figuring out a deal that would sell the rights to get a Blade Runner sequel made. 2 of Ridley Scott's ideas, involving his brother Tony Scott and another one that would have been a standalone sequel, were eventually scrapped, and it wasn't until 2011 when Alcon Entertainment eventually managed to option the rights, promising not to do a remake, but it would have to be a sequel, and that Bud Yorkin would get to be credited as producer, that a deal was struck. By the time a sequel really was in production, in 2015, Bud Yorkin had passed away, at the ripe old age of 89, leaving a wife and an ex-wife who each had partial rights and a producer's credit, along with his posthumous one. Ridley Scott was signed on as the director of the new film, and Hampton Fancher, who wrote the original screenplay, along with Michael Green, who was working with Ridley Scott on Alien Covenant. However, as Alien Covenant took up more and more of Ridley Scott's time, he eventually stepped down as director, although he did help revise and doctor the screenplay. Alcon Entertainment started shopping around for a new director, eventually deciding to continue a creative partnership with Denis Villeneuve, who had worked with them on Prisoners. Although he was extremely hesitant at first, Blade Runner is his favorite film, and he felt overwhelmed and insecure, Villeneuve finally agreed. Part of that, and part of the reason they managed to get Harrison Ford to agree to sign on, is how great the screenplay was, especially with Hampton Fancher working on it as a direct connection to the original. Fancher and Michael Green wrote the lead role of Kay specifically for Ryan Gosling, tailoring it to his acting ability.
Don't you know what I am?
Yeah. Guy eating rice. What's that?
It's a tree.
Oh. Never seen a tree before. It's pretty.
It's dead.
Blade Runner 2049 is set 30 years after the events of the original Blade Runner. The universe has really transformed. Tyrell Corporation, who originally made the replicants, went bankrupt after a series of replicant mutinies, closing after replicants became illegal. However, continued universe-wide famines led to the rise of synthetic farming, and an industrialist named Neander Wallace, played shockingly well by Jared Leto, who helped colonize 9 more planets and mastered synthetic farming. Wallace bought the old Tyrell Corporation and then pushed to re-legalize replicants because there was a labor shortage and humans didn't want to do the slave labor required to farm. His new replicants would be forced to obey, and any replicant who went off script would be retired. This strict obey policy made it easier to recognize who is and isn't a replicant, leading to the scrapping of things like the Voight comp test. It also meant replicants can now be cops who retired other replicants, and that's where Ryan Gosling's Officer K comes in. Working for the LAPD, K drives around retiring his own kind. Replicant on replicant violence.
How does it feel? Killing your own kind.
I don't retire my own kind because we don't run. Only older models do.
And your new models are happy scraping the shit.
On a mission, Kay goes to retire Sabra Morton, played in a cool cameo by Dave Bautista. Sabra Morton is one of the older models who now all have to be retired. After retiring him, Kay finds a box buried under a tree that he brings back to the LAPD to analyze, realizing it's bones from a replicant, but shockingly has a C-section scar. This means that replicants can reproduce, opening up all kinds of questions about whether they're too close to humans to actually be ethically used as slave labor.
It looks like an emergency C-section. The cuts are clean. No sign of a struggle.
He was a combat medic. Maybe he tried to save her and he just couldn't.
He didn't seem like the saving type.
Went to the trouble of burying her. A sentimental skin job. Sorry.
Officer K, despite being a replicant, is ordered to search out and destroy the only example of a child of a replicant. Blade Runner 2049, as the original Blade Runner did, raises questions about what it means to be a human being or what it means to be quote-unquote real. However, on an even more basic level perhaps than Blade Runner, which was fixated on empathy as a driving factor, in the original Blade Runner, what separates humans from replicants is empathy, shown by the Voight-Kampff test. In Blade Runner 2049, Wallace Corporation has even stripped that away, and it's now determined by the somewhat nebulous idea of free will.
Every leap of civilization was built off the back of a disposable workforce. We lost our stomach for slaves, unless engineered.
Like the philosophical debate over free will versus determinism, the assumption is that replicants are unlike humans because their actions are determined by orders, even if they can make individual decisions within that framework. As this understanding starts to unravel, it raises questions. If humans don't want to do the work to synthetically farm, can it ever be ethical to use these quote-unquote synthetic humans as slave labor? Do they mind? Does it matter if they mind? Can you order them not to mind? It also explores synthetic memories implanted in the replicants in a way that I think really does a service to the original musings in Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep and Philip K. Dick's work writ large.
I love birthday parties.
You work for Wallace?
Subcontract. I'm one of his suppliers. He offered to buy me out, but I take my freedom where I can find it.
Blade Runner 2049 stars some great character actors. Lenny James of The Walking Dead, Hayama Abbas, David Damalchian, Wood Harris, Barkhad Abdi from Captain Phillips, and the great Edward James Olmos here again as Gaff from the original Blade Runner.
You wasn't long for this world.
Also,
Something in his eyes.
Mackenzie Davis and Robin Wright, a huge ensemble cast ranging the spectrum of this world. Ana de Armas as Joy, a product offered by Wallace to act as a romantic companion and is advertised to be everything you want to see and everything you want to hear. Adding a feminist layer to these questions, there are both replicant and human sex workers in this universe. And the new product is a holographic companion. The amazing cinematography was done by Roger Deakins, who has worked on multiple films with Villeneuve, especially on both Prisoners and Sicario. It's a visually stunning film, the performances are really cool, and there's a whole lot to talk about.
And I encourage play. I do. Keeps them occupied and it makes them nimble, right? But it's work. It's work that molds them into a child worth having.